In the previous course, you did some very basic work with stored procedures. You did some inserts, updates, deletes, things like that. Let's go ahead and look at one of the stored procedures. You don't need to understand it at this point. I'm just going to show you how to execute it. So I'm going to go open the database, programmability, stored procedures. Okay, you want to avoid, if you accidentally get in the system stored procedures, you may see a lot of weird things. I'm just going to show you that now. It takes it a couple of minutes to expand. Okay, you're going to see things like DBOSP help diagram definition, sysSP add, all these kind of things. If you see a bunch of weird stuff like that, just close it out. You're in system stuff, and you don't want to mess with system stuff because that's stuff Microsoft put there. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's grab one of the insert stored procedures. So we're going to grab p insert person. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead of that. I'm going to right click on it. Well, actually, before I do that, let me open it up. And if you can see here, here's all the input parameters to that stored procedure, and then you can see it returns an integer, which would be the success or failure of that stored procedure. Okay, so let's go ahead and script it as create to new query editor window, and all that's going to do is show me the code inside the stored procedure, and I only want to look at that very briefly here. You don't need to understand all this, and you're not going to be doing really elaborate stored procedures. But this will give you an idea. Okay, so here's the create statement. Here's all the things that can be input to it. Okay, and you can see the final thing that's output can be a varchar, which is an error status. Okay, so there are in here where it starts begin, that's where the stored procedure begins. There are some local variables set here that are created that are used inside the stored procedure. Again, you don't need to worry about that right now. You're going to see a couple of things here: begin try and begin transaction. Begin try is actually what we use to start error handling. Begin transaction starts a transaction. Again, you don't need to know that. Okay, this is just a very quick overview. You're going to learn this stuff later on. First thing that happens is there's a select from person um, to see if this person already exists, and the criteria are if there's a first name and the last name and the date of birth are all the same, then it'll say okay. It'll dump that person's ID into uh, this temporary variable, and it's going to test. If the person ID is not equal to 0, that means we found them in the database, and then so it throws an error and everything ends, and you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so if it doesn't, what's happening here next is it's actually calling another stored procedure. Actually, it's not. I'm sorry, it's not calling a stored procedure. It's actually doing a direct insert, like you learned in the previous course, inserting the person.person. Here's all of the fields in person.person that are going to be filled up. And here's the values that were passed into the stored procedure, and these are the parameters from the stored procedure that were passed in. And the last one here, if you notice this, it says sysDateTime. What that is actually, it's an internal function in SQL Server, and what that does, it'll automatically populate this with the current date and time. Okay. The last thing that I'm really going to mention is when a new person is created, their person ID is automatically generated by SQL Server. And so we want to grab that, and it's called an identity, and it's a variable called at identity. You see it's in kind of a pink color. That's because it's a predefined variable inside of SQL Server. Okay, and what we're doing here is we're putting it inside a variable called person ID because it's going to be used later on. And then finally, this is just some transaction error handling stuff. Okay, so again, you don't really have to understand this at the stored procedure at this point. It's just in case you wanted to open it up, you at least have a little bit of an idea as to what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new query window. And I'm going to say execute. I want to see, make this a little bigger. Move this over. P DBO, I'm sorry, P cert person. Okay, I gotta get that. P insert person. I'm gonna do a space and see it automatically lists all of the variables that have to come in. And so we have a first name, middle name, last name. All right, so I'm going to say first name is going to be George. I won't have a comma. And you notice how it highlights it. It's nice. So George. I'm sorry, the first thing is title. You see how it, and we're going to say George doesn't have a title. Or I tell you what, we'll make him a doctor. Call it doctor. And then we'll put a comma. And so now it highlights first name. And so now we're going to last middle name. And we're going to sort George J, we'll call him just an initial for now. Jetson. And then he has no suffix, so we'll just leave it blank. So I'll just put two empty quotes there. And remember, in SQL, unlike other programming, if you have a string, it's single quotes and not double quotes. Date of birth. Okay, so we're going to give him a date of birth of, we'll give him January 15th, and we'll say he was born in 1985. Okay. Then we're going to give him an email address of george@hotmail.com and contact preference. And you can see here, if you look at it, it is says no yes, and that is actually a user-defined type. Well, don't worry about that. We're going to give it a 1, okay, because it has an option of either 0 or 1, like true and false. Modified by, and we're going to say it was modified by, I'll just put my initials. It was like that. And then new person ID is output. We're going to say out. And we're going to say at, and I haven't declared that yet, person ID. And so what I have to do is I just have to say up here is okay. So I had a bit of an issue here. I had SQL Server freeze. Actually, my whole computer crashed. So we're back. Things may look just slightly different because I had to. This is where it was when it kind of froze up. Okay, so what I was doing was writing execute DBO insert person, George Jetson, all this, and then we had 3 output parameters. And so I had output the new person ID, success, which is a 1 or a 0, and then an error status, which is in varchar 50. Okay, so what I have to do first is I have to declare some variables to hold those output parameters, and that's pretty easy. I just say declare, and at person ID I will call it, it's integer. I'll do it again. Excuse me, at success. You call these things anything you want. I'm just using that as, you know, an obvious name. And declare at error status varchar, and that was 50. I want to make sure. See, it says n varchar 50, and I could say n varchar 50. The only reason I make sure it's the same length as a minimum is I don't want to truncate any message that may have come out, if any at all. A lot of times you don't have anything, and so now I have to actually put these into the execute. So I'm going to say at person ID as out. You have to always put output. That is the key here. And I'm just going to go on a new line to keep it all on the screen so you can see it. And we're going to say at. The next thing is success, and it's going to be output again. Don't forget the output keyword because it doesn't like it. You know, you think it would be able to figure it out on its own, but unfortunately it can't. All right, so there we go. So that's the entire query. Now, I won't see those outputs unless I actually write a select statement to select the information out of those. So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say select, and I'm going to say at person. There's no table, so it's just a select, and I'm going to give it a name, and I'm just going to give one of these a name. We'll call it person. Okay, you notice it's in single quotes. Then I'm going to say at success. I'm going to say at error status, like that. Okay, so there's everything, and I only have to do all this stuff, you know, the declares and this other output stuff, only if that particular store procedure does have output parameters. Not all of them do. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and execute it. And sure enough, I have somebody come back with an ID of 247, so that's the new person ID. Remember we saw that add identity thing inside the stored procedure? Well, that's where that was stored, and then that value was returned back to us, so we know that person's ID. The success column is 1, and error status, there was no error status because we didn't throw an error, which is wonderful. Okay, the reason I put the person ID here is to show you that when you do these selects against variables, and I'm going to pop and see if I can. I wish it would allow this bottom half to be uh, bigger, but it doesn't. All right, so person ID, if you see this column that says person ID, that's because I gave it a name. These other two columns, it says no column name, because I didn't give it an explicit column ID. Okay, so the last thing I will do is I'm going to do a query against person table just to do a double check. And I'm going to say select everything star from person dot person where last name is Jetson. Okay, and I caution you, this database has very little data in it. Using asterisk can make you an enemy of pretty much everybody on a big system. You imagine a table that's got millions of rows in it, and you want to bring everything back. It's going to bog down the database. It's going to bog down your network. It could crash your computer. It's a lot of bad stuff going on there. So use that very judiciously. Okay, so I'm going to go execute, and sure enough, here is person ID 247, Dr. George J. Jetson, birth date 1985, January 1st, George at hotmail.com, email contact preferences 1, and modified date was automatically created by that sysdate thing we saw, and modified by GS, my initials, is deleted is no. All right, so there's a little review about how to execute a stored procedure.